This podcast is sponsored by My Bump to Baby Family Protection and Legal Directory. To find your nearest advisor or family law solicitor, head over to www.mybumptobaby.com/family protection legal. Do you love the idea of being your own boss? What about saving money on childcare because you can actually work flexibly around your family? My Bump to Baby is rapidly expanding, and we are looking for people to run their own pregnancy to preschool hubs in their local area. Full training is provided, ongoing mentor support, fantastic regular team incentives, a bonus scheme, uncapped commission, review products for free, and review days out too. If you are interested in being the My Bump to Baby manager for your local area, email us business@mybumptobaby.com. Limited space available. Hello and welcome to My Bump to Baby Expert Podcast, where we bring experts from all over the UK to answer your questions on everything pregnancy to preschool. Hello everybody and welcome to My Bump to Baby Expert Podcast. Today I am speaking to Nadine Moaddel from Mancini Legal Solicitors in Horsham. Today we're going to be talking about divorce and finances after divorce too. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everybody and welcome to My Bump to Baby Expert Podcast. Today I am joined by Nadine Moaddel from Mancini Legal Solicitors in Horsham. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited to speak to you on this subject. Today we're going to be talking about finances on divorce, which is a subject I think a lot of people delve into before they're at the stages of kind of looking into divorce. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you about this. Can you just introduce yourself and what you do at Mancini Law, if that's okay?
Yes, so I'm a head of family at Mancini Legal. I deal with family law, so all areas in regards to children, finances, divorce. I'm also a director, so dealing with sort of HR, management, etc., which is really interesting, and it's a new role for me, which I've been really enjoying. So, yeah, it's very varied.
That is brilliant. So with the divorce side of things, do you find that you get a lot of questions before people end up going for the divorce? Do you get a lot of calls around, all the different circumstances around finances?
Yes, so a lot of inquiries I get, people are sort of unsure whether they want to go ahead with the divorce. They're very much at the inquiry stage. Sometimes they sort of look online beforehand and they seem to have answers. And whilst it's good to Google things, sometimes it can be misleading because, the authority is not as, watertight as we would like. So I'd always say, even if you're thinking and contemplating a divorce, it's a good idea to speak with a family lawyer. Yes, it's good to speak with family and friends, but their experience is going to be very different to yours. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Okay, brilliant. So if someone was thinking of leaving their spouse, how do they go about getting a divorce? Because a lot of people, it'll be a first time thing and they've got children and, they're at this crossroads in their life and they're thinking, right, how do I actually get a divorce?
Mm-hmm. So often I would encourage the individual to speak with their partner first, so it's not going to come as a shock. So that's often the hardest part, just to see whether there's any way to rekindle anything, try maybe counselling. But if they've sort of set their mind on it, they know they want to go through the process. Now you can do it online. So you need to find the right ground to petition under. And at the moment, no fault divorce is going to be brought into law next April. So for the time being, unless you've been separated for more than 2 years, you have to use a fault-based ground. So the most commonly used one is unreasonable behaviour. So if you've been separated from your partner for less than 2 years, for example, and you want to go through the process, then you'd have to use that and give the court some examples of what you find to be unreasonable. So that's how you get the process started.
That makes sense. I imagine that can cause some disagreements as well, can't it? Because it can be quite hard to read that for the other person. Yes. So with a divorce, do you have to go to court or not?
So for the divorce process itself, provided it's not contentious and the other party agrees, you can agree on costs, then no, you don't need to go to court. It's all paper-based. It's all dealt with by the judge sitting in chambers. And basically, they receive loads of applications on a daily basis. All they need to be satisfied with is obviously that you're entitled to get a divorce. And if so, then so the process of divorce is the petitioner applies for the divorce, then your spouse would need to respond to that divorce to say basically they have no issue with it, they don't intend to defend the proceedings, and then the petitioner would apply for the decree nisi, which is the hearing that you hear about in the media. So that's when they refer to you can achieve a quickie divorce. So when you hear someone got divorced, that's actually very misleading. It's basically for the court to say you're entitled to a divorce. That's the decree nisi hearing, after which you have to wait 6 weeks and a day before you can apply for the final stage, which is the absolute. But the short answer is no, you don't have to go to court.
Right. Okay. So would if someone disagreed and didn't want to get a divorce, is that when it gets a little bit more kind of longer, I suppose, the actual divorce proceedings?
Well, yes. What most people tend to do is they try to ignore the petition, and they think that that's going to achieve what they want, and it's going to delay proceedings. But there are ways and means around it. So you need to make an extra application, which is extra fees invariably, but there are ways around it. If they specifically intend to defend the divorce, they'll need to have grounds to do so, in which case a hearing will be listed. But I have to say, in my experience, that's never happened before. It's more often than not they try and pretend to they haven't received it or they ignore it, in which case you can, as I say, make other applications to overcome that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned unreasonable behaviour. What other grounds are there for divorce?
So you have unreasonable behaviour, you have desertion and adultery as well, and then you have 2 years separation with consent. Those are the no fault based grounds, and then 5 years separation without consent. As I say, unreasonable behaviour seems to be the most commonly cited one, just because most people haven't been separated for 2 years before they decide they want to start the process.
That makes sense. So what does unreasonable behaviour mean? Because it's quite a broad statement, isn't it, really? Yes. Can it mean, what does it mean?
It's very individual to you. So if you feel that the behaviour of your spouse has led to the breakdown of the marriage, it's whatever you consider to be unreasonable. So something like they've been working long hours, they don't come home, or there's been a lack of love and affection, they don't want to communicate, even if they snore too loudly and you can't sleep in the bedroom, that's led to issues in that department. It's literally what's personal to you. So as long as you can show adequate reasoning, the court's going to accept it. What you need to be careful with is that you don't draft it into non-contentious of a way. So by meaning that you need to show the court there's good enough reason. It's not just going to be something ridiculous. They have to be satisfied there has actually been behaviour which is not reasonable.
That makes sense. So how much does a divorce actually cost then? Because I know a lot of people think, oh goodness, like it's going to be thousands and a lot of money. How much does it cost?
So there's a divorce fee, which is currently £550. If you choose to do it yourself, again, that's the same fee that you'd pay. You don't necessarily need a solicitor to help you with the divorce side. But if you do decide to engage a solicitor, they'll charge their own fees. We charge a sort of a fixed fee package. So we often do that. So it's about £750 plus VAT at the moment, which is quite competitive. Yeah. And that's again on the basis that it's not challenged and the other party consents to it, and the divorce can sort of carry on through the normal process. Obviously, if there's issues with service or they're not responding to the petition, then the fees will be slightly higher.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what are the benefits of choosing to go with a family law solicitor rather than doing it yourself?
So one of the main sort of advantages is that you avoid delay to the process. So you know that the court is going to accept the petition, and again, make sure that the grounds of behaviour, that if you're using unreasonable behaviour, that is presented in a correct way to the court. There's also protocol that you need to follow. So it's always advisable to show your spouse a copy of the petition before you file it, at least to give them the heads up and say, by the way, these are the reasons I'm going to put down. It's always a good idea to try and agree them beforehand as well. So then it's not going to be a surprise to them, which will get their back up. So it's just sort of that sort of basic process that you would probably not appreciate. And again, if there's issues with service or if the divorce is defended, then that's something a solicitor can help you with. And probably one of the most important ones is making sure that the decree absolute isn't applied for, which is obviously what we would do until the finances have been resolved. So
right, yeah, it makes sense. If you're going in to this blind, I think, you know, it's going to be much better having someone there by your side talking you through the whole process, because it seems quite a daunting experience. Yes. So in terms of finances now, who would get the house if you did get a divorce? How does that actually work?
So that is one of the most common questions that I am asked, funny enough. So really the way that the courts approach it is they rely on something called the Section 25 factors, and they, under the Matrimonial Causes Act, so they'll look at several factors such as the children of the family, so who are the children going to continue living with, what the needs are of each party, what their earning potentials are, etc., health. There's so many factors, but you know, the short answer is it depends on what you agree with your spouse. So you can either reach an agreement amongst yourselves. It's often called a sort of a kitchen table discussion, where you can reach an agreement. You'd then go to a solicitor and say, okay, how does this agreement weigh up? Is it fair? Is it reasonable? In which case, then you should both provide basic financial disclosure just to make sure that it's balanced and proportionate. So most cases I deal with are needs-based cases. So if there is enough needs, if there's enough sort of money to go around to, for example, for the wife to stay living at the home with the children, then often that is agreed. There's no right or wrong answer, to be honest. It's basically predicated on needs, and that's the main thing the courts will look at: what is fair and what each party needs moving forwards.
And then they reach an agreement from
yes.
there. Right, okay. So in terms of the house then, before it gets to the divorce, obviously you're not together. So who should be staying in the house while the divorce is going through? Because what if you've got two people with children and both won't leave the house?
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do to force someone to leave. And more often than not, parties will continue living together whilst they're going through this process, which can be very awkward.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, especially if it's contentious or there are financial proceedings or even children proceedings. So sometimes a party will move out and they'll rent somewhere in the interim whilst matters are being resolved. But I say this to my clients all the time: even if they do move out for short term or long term, they can return to the family home at any time, provided they're on the deeds of the property, because if they own the home, there's nothing to stop them returning. they often worry and say, well, what if the locks are changed? Then what, I'm stopped from coming back home. But the fact is, if you own that property, you've got every right to return. If there's issues to do with domestic violence, for example, and in the interim, you want your spouse to leave the property and they refuse to do so, there are orders that you can obtain from the court. Again, they're not guaranteed. These occupation orders can be difficult to obtain, but there are ways and means around it. Right,
okay, that's really good to know. So on to the children then, after a divorce. Who actually, it sounds wrong putting it like this, but who gets the children in a divorce, or how does that work?
So I always encourage clients to understand that children matters should always be regarded as separate to financial arrangements, i.e. you don't want to mix the two. I know that whoever has the children would arguably have a greater need, but more often than not, parties reach an agreement amongst themselves. They agree to split time however they see fit, what's in the best interest of the children, and you don't normally need to record that formally. They can reach their own agreements. If they can't agree, and if mediation fails, mediations where they go to a neutral third party, they try and reach an agreement as to what would work for them and the child or children. If that fails, then court proceedings become inevitable, and then obviously the court will make a decision on that basis. But again, it's always predicated on what is in the best interest of the child, rather than what the parents specifically want.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just on with the children as well, another subject, grandparents, do they have a right to see their children? So say, for example, two people got a divorce, the dad wasn't bothered or the mum wasn't bothered about seeing the children. What about the grandparents on that side? Are they entitled to see those children or not?
Well, with grandparents, it's slightly trickier. So they don't have a automatic right to see their grandchildren. And if the other parent refused to facilitate contact, and again, they didn't want to be reasonable, then a grandparent could make an application to the court. They would need to do so. They'd need to apply for permission to basically make the application. So it's not just a straightforward C100 as a parent would do. They'd have to file an additional form, a C2, which is again permission to apply for contact. And it is a real shame, and I think that's an area of law that does need to catch up with reality, because again, grandparents a lot of the time they do act as surrogate parents when parents are working. They do, they are valuable in that sort of family constellation.
It's very sad, really, because, like you said, a lot of these grandparents, may have had these children a lot of the time when the parents are working, and it's like, someone out of spite could just literally shut the door and be like, no, you're not seeing them anymore. So it is really sad because, they really, I don't know about anyone else's grandparents, but my little boy's grandparents just love seeing him all the time, and they'd be heartbroken. It just is very sad. But that's good that there is something in place that they can apply for. But I understand what you mean as in catching up wise.
Yes.
Yeah. So what divorce settlement will each party be entitled to, and how are finances split? I know before you mentioned it's based on the scenarios that they've both got. Is that with everyone then? Is it all individual?
So it's a very difficult question to sort of answer succinctly, and I apologise if I sort of go around the subject a bit. But the first factor that the court look at is what is fair, what is reasonable, and what's balanced. The majority of cases are needs-based cases, which means that the total assets that each party has, minus any liabilities, it's generally not enough to meet the needs of both parties. I mean, you're basically going from two adult household with two lots of incomes to splitting that in half and trying to make that work. So really the first factor is making sure that the needs of the children are covered. They're the first consideration. They're not the primary consideration, but again, that's what the courts will view. And the most important thing is that there is a full disclosure of financial assets. That is a predication, no matter how you reach an agreement. If you don't disclose your assets fully and at a later stage it's uncovered that you didn't do so, then that can invalidate the whole agreement. So that's what people don't realise. And if they think, okay, well, I don't think my pension pot should be included as part of this because I got it before the marriage. Again, I'll say in the majority of cases, everything goes in the pot. Pensions, family, home sort of funds from that, any bank accounts, etc. So more often than not, you need to include everything within that financial settlement unless there is an agreement as to the contrary.
Right, that makes sense. So with people that, sorry, I'm going to throw you off subject a little bit here now, but with people that aren't married, how does it work? Is that a totally different ball game to what we've discussed? Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And again, that's another area that resolution is. I'm a member of that sort of society whereby we're solicitors and we try and deal with cases in the most non-contentious way. But they've been petitioning for years now for right to have cohabitees because there is this presumption of common law marriage. So if you've got a child with someone, if you've been with someone for a certain amount of time, you'll then get rights and to finances when you separate, which is just not the case. You're so vulnerable as a cohabitee, even if you've got children together, even if you own property together, even if you share your finances and you've been together for a number of years. So it's important for people to realise that and to sort their finances out accordingly.
Right, that makes sense. No, I think you've answered everything there. It was really interesting because I think a lot of people, it might be the first time they're actually going through this, and it's quite a daunting subject, really.
Yes, it can be, and it's being a family lawyer. I do joke sometimes. I feel like a counsellor at times, and a lawyer, and all those other things, and all those other roles, because it's difficult to separate the emotions sometimes from the practical side. And what I tell clients all the time is you need to sometimes, take each day as it comes. It can be very overwhelming. Sometimes the process feels like it's going on forever. It can last for longer than a year if you can't agree with finances. So unless you take that stepped approach, you basically won't be able to cope with it. So it's just recognising that. And that's why it's important to have a solicitor by your side who understands that, who can explain the process and break it down, make it more manageable.
Can I just ask one more question that's popped into my head, actually? If your divorce, say, does take a year, what happens if either party, while that's going through, has moved on and they're in a new relationship? Does that affect the divorce?
Oh, sadly, it happened. Well, I say sadly, it's not sad. People are entitled to start new relationships, but they, parties often do enter into new relationships. Sometimes they can even get a divorce and then get remarried during that process before they've even dealt with the finances.
Oh my goodness.
The first marriage. So that can often complicate things, especially if there is a remarriage. Where there's cohabitation, there is a section on Form E, which is the disclosure form, where you need to disclose all your finances, whether there's a requirement to provide your new partner's information on there. But in all honesty, in the majority of cases, that party won't disclose the information because they say, well, this is a new relationship, we're not engaged, we're not married, so therefore I'm not compelled to give that information. So yeah, it can be contentious. So it's not one of those things that you would actively pursue unless they've remarried, and then you have to consider their new spouse's finances and their information.
And of course, there's after that, just briefly, obviously, when you're thinking about divorce, you also need to then think about your will as well, because a lot of people have life insurance policies, and you will, once you've done that, you're married. But then if your will still stands and you're not married, do you talk to people about getting a new will straight after?
Yes, straight after the divorce, because divorce does affect your will. Again, because you'd want to change your will as soon as you get a divorce, because you may have referred to, most people want to do a mirror will, so they leave everything to their spouse. And obviously, when you get a divorce, I'm sure you wouldn't want to have that same provision in place. So I encourage my clients to do that as soon as they get divorced. So that's very important. And another thing that people don't really think about as well is, if you own a property jointly with your spouse, more people than not own it as joint tenants, which means that you own it 50-50 in equal shares. But if one of you were to predecease the other whilst the proceedings were going ahead, then basically their 50% share would automatically vest in the other person, which again is probably not what you would want to happen. So to protect your 50% share, you would want to sever that tenancy, so your tenants in common rather than joint tenants, so you can at least seek to preserve some of that pot of the family home. But again, to what extent that will be protected will depend on the needs as well. And that's a whole other issue. If during divorce proceedings, you probably wouldn't even think about.
No, I wouldn't even think about that. And that's, again, the benefits of having a family law solicitor above just going online and thinking, right, I'll buy this, because all of this information, you wouldn't get told. And then, God forbid you did pass away, your partner's going to be getting... Well, ex-partner's going to be getting a lot, really, aren't they? And I imagine, like you said, that isn't something that you'd want at that time. So,
no. And sometimes I do have clients where the other party, for example, has a terminal illness, and they say, is it even worth going through this process? And sometimes they may say, well, actually, given they've only got X number of months, and it's horrible to even talk about it, but you have to think about, okay, you're going through this process, perhaps sort out your will arrangements, try and reach an agreement with them first, rather than going through the divorce process, because who knows if they'll even survive past that point. So those are all practical things that, as you say, Google can't tell you, and sometimes the reliability of those sources isn't great. You don't know who's writing them.
And they're not up to date, some of them. The laws change, don't they? And, it's making sure they're up to date as well. And when you actually speak to someone, you've got that contact there, and, you're in good hands then. You're going to get everything discussed and everything covered, and they're going to be aware of everything. So that's great. No, that's really interesting. That I've enjoyed recording that with you today. So thank you so much. Could you just tell people again where they can find you if they want more information on this subject, if that's okay?
Yes, so we have offices in Horsham, Hayward Heath and Crawley. I'm based in Horsham. So if you'd like to find out more, then please go on our website. It's mancinilegal.com. And as part of the department, I offer free 30-minute consultations for all new clients. So yeah, please get in touch if you do need some advice.
That's brilliant. It's nice for people to be able to know who they're talking to as well. So it's been great having you on here, and thanks so much for being so helpful. I'm sure that'll answer a lot of questions. I get these things in my head where I just have to ask them, and I think we've covered a lot there. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching our YouTube video today. If you are liking what you're viewing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can see more of our videos and more of our updates.